Gave you the wrong card there. Good evening, everyone, and welcome. Oh, and Dick and Nardine have already said hi. I know we're going to have some new folks joining us tonight. Some of them I know are going to be joining a little bit late. There's interest in this course, which is a wonderful thing. So, yeah, hey, Mike, good to have you here. Please say hi when you come in if you feel comfortable doing that. Let everybody know who you are and where you are. Carolyn's with us tonight. Wonderful. Tonight is the first night of our new format. We're going to be doing a Bible study, a survey of the Bible. You know, I used to teach Disciple One Bible study every year, and I loved doing it. In recent years, since the pandemic, it's been very difficult to get folks together in person for a class or even into a Zoom class. And this format seems to work for at least some people, but unfortunately, none of the curriculum are licensed to use. Hey, Gene's here. None of the curriculum are licensed to be used in the way that I'm doing this. So I said, hey, I'm going to do my own. And since I'm doing it myself, I get to do it the way I would want it to be done. Because every study I've ever done, of course, I do the ones I like the most. But there's always something you would do different if it was up to you, right? So this is my opportunity to do that. It is a cold night in southern Maryland. It was 23 degrees when I left the house tonight. It is the coldest I can remember it being since I have been here, and I think it's supposed to still get colder yet tonight. So, wow. All right, we've got more people joining in, so if you feel comfortable letting us know who you are, let us know you're here and where you're joining us from. I want to try to build a little bit of a sense of community in this class. We're going to be going through the Old Testament first. It's going to take us over a year to do that, but each class I'm going to try and keep to about half an hour, and the homework for each class will be even less than that. I'm going to be giving each week a paraphrasing of a traditional translation, so it'll sound like Bible, but it'll be easier to read than the way it came out of the box. It's surprising how poorly Bible translations follow English, at least the rules of English grammar, and there's reasons for that. They want to be as precise on some things as they can in relation to the Greek and the Hebrew, but that means sacrificing readability in English by breaking some of our rules, particularly in punctuation. So, hey, Sean is here. Good evening. So each week I'm going to be putting out a paraphrasing of the lesson for tonight. Tonight we are doing, hey, and Sarah's here. I knew Sarah was going to join us. She thought she might be a little bit late. The paraphrasing is going to, the paraphrasing will not have any verse numbers or chapter numbers in it. I will put those at the beginning so you can see what we're going to be looking at. Of course, when the Bible was written, it didn't have any chapter numbers or verse numbers. Those were all added by us to make it easier for each to tell people where things were and to find stuff. So I'm taking all that out to make it more manageable. If you would like a copy of the paraphrasing that I'm going to be using, please just email me. I switched that to my email address at my website, and I've created a special email list just for this class. Each week I'm going to send out the text that we're going to be using to talk about. Tonight we're doing Genesis chapter 1, verse 1 through chapter 2, verse 3. So if you want to get the scripture in advance, please email me. Also, use this email address if there's any questions about the scripture that you want to be sure that I address in the well, putting the question to me in an email does not guarantee that I will address it, but at least I'll know that there is a wish. It makes it much more likely that I'll address it. Let's put it that way. And of course, if you have any other questions, you can always put them in the chat as we go through tonight. So if you miss a lesson, the easiest way to catch up on it will be to go to my YouTube channel and watch it there. It will still be on Facebook. It's just I find that finding videos that are more than a day or so old on Facebook can be really challenging, even if you know which page they're supposed to be on. So let's see, I think that's everything that I wanted to talk about tonight. Carmen is here. Welcome, Carmen. Great to have you here. Let's go ahead and have a word of prayer. Gracious God, may the words of my mouth and the meditations of all of our hearts be acceptable in your sight, for you alone are our rock and our Redeemer. Amen. All right, so let us get started tonight with Genesis chapter 1. If you've got if I emailed it to you and you've got it handy, you're not in the car or anything, you might want to pull it out and follow through. Otherwise, just listen. In the beginning, God created the heavens and the earth. The earth was formless and empty. Darkness was on the surface of the deep, and God's Spirit hovered over the surface of the waters. God said, "Let there be light." And there was light. God saw the light and saw that it was good. God divided the light from the darkness. God called the light day, and the darkness he called night. There was evening and there was morning, the first day. So we'll pause right there and do a little bit of commentary. So the interesting thing about Genesis that most people don't notice, I certainly didn't notice it before I went to seminary, was that we assume that there are things that are there that are not in fact there. And one of the things that people say all the time that is not actually there is that God created the universe out of nothing. And the word nothing is not there. Now, that could just be a grammatical thing, ancient Hebrew, and this is a very, very old story in its oldest form. It goes back, 4,000 or 5,000 years. It was probably passed down orally before it was written down. And the Hebrew numerical system didn't have a zero in those days. And the concept of nothing was a pretty vague concept. They didn't have words for a word for nothing the way we would use it in the cosmic sense. They had no concept of an empty void. But that's irrelevant because that's not what they're trying to talk about. At least when the story picks up. Maybe there was nothing before the story picks up, but when the story picks up, there is not nothing, there is something. So this story is actually a story about God forming something out of something else. And what he is forming is a beautiful work of art that has order and sense and meaning and purpose. What he started with was something that was a mess, basically. So in the beginning, there was not nothing. In the beginning, there was a mess. So what does it say? Darkness was on the earth was formless and empty. So it is without form. It's there, but it's without form, and it's empty. There's no life on it. And it says that God's Spirit hovered over the surface of the waters. So in some translations call it the deep. I might go back and change it to the deep. The idea of this deep, or an abyss is another word that is sometimes used, is a bottomless, surfaceless ocean. And in the Bible, the sea is very often a symbol for chaos, something that has no order, something that has no pattern to it, something that is unpredictable, something that is dangerous, something that is bottomless. So the idea is that God is taking something that has no form and no order, and God is bringing something beautiful into existence out of it. And it says that God's Spirit hovered over the surface of the water. Now you'll see that all through the Bible, and this is partly linguistic but partly intentional, God's Spirit and God's breath and the wind are all very closely related. They're all the same word in Hebrew. Okay, so the God's Spirit hovering over the deep is the same as God's breath blowing across these waters, and that breath, that Spirit is about to do something miraculous. God said, because you breathe when you speak, right? And God is the same way. When God is speaking speaking into existence. God's creative. God doesn't use hands in this or anything like that. God speaks, and it comes to be. This is God's word coming out. And when God breathes life into Adam, when we get to chapter 2, that's the Spirit leaving God and entering into Adam. So God said, "Let there be a dome in the middle of the waters, and let it divide the waters." God made the dome and divided the waters which were under the dome from the waters which were above the dome. And it was so. And God called the dome sky. And there was evening and there was morning the second day. Hi, we've got more people coming in here. Welcome, Amy. Welcome, Deb. All right, so the dome. And that's a word that gets translated into a lot of different things in a lot of different Bibles. The firmament. I like the word dome. Dome is easiest to understand because what we're supposed to picture here is like a bubble. Okay, now remember, we're starting with an abyss, a bottomless, surfaceless ocean that extends infinitely in every direction, and it has no form or order to it. And into it, God is putting this dome that separates the waters over the dome from the waters under the dome. So there's like a bubble in the middle of all this chaos. And within that bubble, God is creating all things that exist. Okay? So everything that exists is going to be inside this bubble. Everything that God has touched, everything that God has brought under his will is inside this bubble. And this bubble, this dome, is what holds chaos away from all of us who are protected nice and safe inside. Unless God decides to poke holes in it, which is what he's going to do when we get to the flood. But we'll hold off on that for a couple of weeks, all right? So an ancient child would ask his father, why is the sky blue? And what would his answer be? Because there's water over it, and you can see the water through the dome, okay? So it's almost like God's hands.
Something went wrong. Please try again.
Siri thought I was talking to her. It's almost like God's hands. Picture it almost like God's hands holding us inside. All right, so God said, let the waters under the sky gather together in one place and let the dry land appear. Now, this water that's inside the bubble is different from the water that's outside the bubble. It's still unpredictable, but it's much more ordered than the water outside the bubble. So let the waters under the sky gather together in one place and let the dry land appear. And it was so. And God called the dry land earth, and the waters he called seas. And God saw that it was good. And God said, let the earth yield grass, plants yielding seeds, fruit trees bearing fruit with their seeds in it on the earth. And it was so. The earth yielded grass, plants yielding seed, and trees bearing fruit with their seeds in it. And God saw that it was good. There was evening and there was morning, a third day. So now God has brought plant life into the world. We're going to go ahead and go on to the next day now. And God said, let there be lights in the dome of the sky to divide the day from the night. Let them mark seasons, days, and years. Let there be lights in the dome of the sky to give light on the earth. And it was so. And God made two great lights, the larger light to rule the day and the smaller light to rule the night. He also made the stars. God set them in the dome of the sky to give light to the earth and to rule over the day and over the night and to divide the light from the darkness. And God saw that it was good. There was evening and there was morning, the fourth day. So the dome, and God is putting lights inside the dome. So the ancients believed that the stars and the sun and the moon were placed on that dome. Okay, so you've got, they envision the sky as being a physical object with all these lights, attached to it. Now notice that in this version that I've given you, and I stayed true to the original on this, some Bibles will say God created the sun and the moon. Well, that's not what it says. Okay, it very intentionally says the larger light and the smaller light. Amy says she's got a weak signal. I'm sorry, my signal here is very strong. I don't know that Atlantic Broadband or BreezeLine or whatever is working optimally, but here on the network we're doing good. Small light and larger light. Why not the sun and the moon? And the answer is because the sun and the moon in the other religions were gods themselves and were worshipped as if they were gods. So this story wants to be clear that we understand that and they use the names. The names of those gods were the same as sun and moon. So in other words, in the ancient world, if you said sun, you were talking about sun god. If you said moon, you're talking about moon god. So the Genesis isn't going to say sun; it's going to say the bigger light. It's not going to say moon; it's going to say the smaller light, because we're not going to bring the names of other deities into this. We want to be sure that everybody understands that the sun and the moon are not creators or gods themselves, but are part of the one true God's creation. So, God said, "Let the waters swarm with living creatures. Let birds fly above the earth in the open dome of the sky." God created the large sea creatures and every living creature that moves, with which the water swarmed, and every winged bird. God saw that it was good, and God blessed them, saying, "Be fruitful and multiply, and fill the waters in the seas, and let birds multiply on the earth." I wish I tweaked that a little more. That was a little hard to follow, wasn't it? There was evening and there was morning, a fifth day. Now God has brought now animal life into the world, but only the fish and the bird. The land animals have not yet come. They will come on the next day. But here's where we start looking at the word creature. And I want to be clear on what the meaning of creature is, because it used to have a very precise meaning that has gotten loose over time. A creature is a living thing created by God. That's what the word means literally. That's why it's got Crete in there. Creature is a living thing, part of God's creation. And therefore it is a good thing because it is a part of God's good creation. That is opposed to, say, a monster. A monster is not a creature. It is not a part of God's created order. It is not good. A monster is something that isn't supposed to be here. It doesn't belong. Nardine says Thurs keep cutting in and out too. That is unfortunate. Don't know what to tell you guys. Am I on the fastest version? I think I am. Gene, evening and morning like this indicates how the Jewish people count a day. Yes, that's true. It begins at sundown. Example, sundown Friday to sundown Saturday is one day, not midnight to midnight or 5 a.m. to 5 to 10 p.m. Yes, that's absolutely correct, Gene, and that's why Karen Livingston says her sound comes and goes. Well, this new Atlantic broadband, it might be called Breezeline now, but a rose by any other name smells as sweet, and an Atlantic broadband by any other name does not. Sorry about that, guys. I swear to you, it is not on my end. Wish I could fix it, but I can't. Okay. Yes. So, yes, there was evening and there was morning, a fifth day, and that's why Christmas Eve service can be at after dark on Christmas Eve and still be Christmas worship service. Anyway, moving on. So God said, "Let the earth produce living creatures, livestock, creeping things." Love that word, that phrase, creeping things. Animals of the earth. And it was so. God made the animals of the earth and the livestock and everything that creeps on the ground, and God saw that it was good. Everything that creeps. So now we have land animals as well. So all of the living things have been created except for one remaining thing, right? And God said, "Let's make humanity in our image, after our likeness. Let them have dominion over the fish of the sea, and over the birds of the sky, and over the livestock, and over all the earth, and over every creeping thing that creeps on the earth." God created humanity in his own image. In God's image, he created them. Male and female, he created them. God blessed them. God said to them, "Be fruitful, multiply, fill the earth, and subdue it. Have dominion over the fish of the sea, over the birds of the sky, over every living thing that moves on the earth." And God said, "Behold, I've given you every plant yielding seed, which is on the surface of all the earth, and every tree which bears fruit yielding seed. It will be your food. To every animal of the earth, and to every bird of the sky, and to everything that creeps on the earth, in which there is life, I've given every green plant for food." And it was so. And God saw everything that he had made, and behold, it was very good. There was evening and there was morning, a sixth day. Now here's the key question. What does it mean to say that humanity was created in God's image? And there are so many books, so many commentaries, so many sermons claiming that it means so many different things. And they're all wrong, and what I'm going to tell you is right. Obviously, I can't prove that. You'll have to choose for yourself. I'm giving you the answer my professor Bruce Birch gave us. To be created in God's image does not mean to have reason. It does not mean that we have the ability to communicate or to cooperate using our language, which sets us apart from the other animals. It does not mean that we have a godlike creative ability. It does not mean any of these things. What does it mean? It means that we serve, being created in God's image means that we serve as God's image. I'm going to pull out a bill here. Every money on the face of the earth just about has an image on it, right? And until recently, that image was always what? A king. Oh, and Bob says it's cutting in and out for him too. I'm so sorry. Until recently, the image that was on the money was the image of a king. And why is that? Or queen, right? British money, Canadian money still has the queen on it. And that is because when a monarch has a territory, they put their image everywhere. Before it was on the money, it was a statue in the middle of town square. The idea was that you may never see the king, in the pre-television world, you never saw the king or the queen, but you saw the image on the money. You saw the image on the statue in the center of town square, and when you saw that image, you knew who the king was, you knew who you were accountable to. So God put God's image on earth, but God's image was not on the face of money. It was not on a statue. It was on us, so that the rest of creation can look at the image and see what God is like. Now that is a blessing, but it's also an awe-inspiring job description, because that means that that when my dog sees me come home, well, that's a bad example because dogs probably think we're God anyway. When my cats see me come home at the end of the day, they're supposed to be able to think, well, I've never met God, but I've met mom and dad here. I shouldn't say mom and dad. I've met the humans who occupy this house with me. So if they're made in God's image, that should tell me something about what God is like. So that is a standard to live up to. The heavens, the earth, and all their vast array then were finished. On the seventh day, God finished his work, and he rested on the seventh day from all his work. And God blessed the seventh day and made it holy, because he rested in it from all his work of creation. So the concept of Sabbath, of a day of rest, goes all the way back to the beginning of the human story. So now is the part where we ask the three questions that we will finish with every week. First of all, what does this story tell us about God? And I'm not attempting to give you every answer to these three questions. I'm going to give you one answer to each of these questions. This tells us, first of all, that there is a distinction between the Creator and the creation. And that is something that is unique to the large monotheistic religions of earth. I should say the Abrahamic religions and the ones that were modeled after them, Christianity, Judaism, Islam, all believe that there is a distinction between the Creator and the creation. Other religions do not necessarily make that distinction. None of the old world pagan religions made that distinction. They believed that there was something divine in everything, They believed that everything was in some way alive. Um, that's why one of the big distinctions between our religion and other religions is that, pagan religions often involved casting of spells. That's because in a pagan religion, the wind is alive. So if you want the wind to blow, you talk to the wind. The rain is alive. If you want the rain to fall, you talk to the rain. And casting of spells is knowing the language that you need to know to communicate with those divine elements. But in our faith, if we want it to rain, if we want the wind to blow, we talk to God about it, because God created the wind and God created the rain and God has dominion over the earth. So God is the one that we talk to about these things. Atheists do not make a distinction between creator and creation because they do not believe in they do not believe in creators. They don't believe that creation is in fact creation. The earth is just the earth. It's not a created thing. It's just there. So there is no authority over the earth to appeal to or to set standards. We believe that there is a fundamental difference between God and literally everything else that exists. In fact, everything that exists, to say that it exists in a different sense than the way God exists. Fundamental difference. That's we talk about the holiness of God. God is completely different from everything else that exists. So then what does this tell us about ourselves? Well, the important thing for me is that we are not the creator, we are creatures. The biggest threat to humanity right now, I believe, is that we are guilty of hubris. We don't all realize that we're guilty. Well, whoever wakes up in the morning and says, I think I'm going to go out and commit an act of hubris today. Hubris, of course, is the sin in which one either believes oneself to be God, or acts as if they were God, or ascribes to themselves godlike qualities. We don't realize we're doing that, but we do that. Both ends of the spectrum, liberal and conservative, whether we're talking about theology or politics, everybody's leaving churches right now. And they're leaving churches because, Gene says it's cutting out too. Maybe it's my service here at the church. I don't know. I'm sorry. I'm not going to reset the router now because, that would pretty much end us for the night. People are leaving churches because they're frustrated with their churches. And one of the things they're frustrated with is that they believe that their church is doing things wrong or is handling things wrong. Some would say my church is too liberal. Some would say my church is too conservative. In every case, though, what it boils down to is, hey, look, I know the difference between right and wrong, and my church apparently doesn't know the difference between right and wrong, so I've got to go find another church that understands right and wrong as well as I do. You hear people constantly basically making the claim that they are morally superior to their churches. And if that's your attitude, the God in that belief system is you. If you're the one that's deciding what's right and wrong, and if your church is pushing back on that and you say, well, my church is too liberal or my church is too conservative, I know what's right, they apparently have lost their way, so I'm going to go off and do my own thing right now. Especially if we then decide, you know what, I'm just going to leave organized religion altogether and do my own thing. Well, then you've really become your own God. That's actually what the Church of Satan teaches. Church of Satan is a real thing. They don't actually worship Satan. They're an atheistic religion. They don't believe in the existence of gods at all. They only chose the name Church of Satan because they believe, I would say accurately, that their value system is the opposite of Christianity. They believe that we've got it backwards. And their belief is that every individual should function as their own God, that every individual should be the final arbiter of right and wrong and good and evil for themselves. Now, very few people would actually say that's how they approach the world, but good grief. That's how we approach the world. And we need to stop that nonsense. When we get to the book of Judges, we're only going to read the most palatable parts of it. Judges, especially toward the end, is not an easy read. And that's because over the course of the book of Judges, as society grows, as the population grows, and as government is not growing to keep pace with it, civilization, culture, values, they all start to come unraveled. And the last line in Judges says, in those days there was no king in the land, and everyone did what was right in their own eyes. And the story that comes right before that summary is the worst story in the Bible by far. Don't go read it right now. You'll just get upset. It's a terrible story. They would not be able to make a movie out of it. It would never happen. It's absolutely hideous. And the point is to say, when we are our own, when we treat ourselves as the final judge of right and wrong, these are the things that happen. Humanity cannot function without a religious system. Everybody has one. They may not call it a religious system, but everybody has built some sort of a system of right and wrong. Everybody has built some sort of a system of what is sacred and what is not. If that system is not something that was given to us by an organized religion, and by the way, I'm not saying we should swallow everything organized religion gives us. We're supposed to push back. We're supposed to question. Asking questions is always a good thing. It's supposed to be a two-way discernment process. But when we walk away from that entirely, and we create our own religious system, well, first of all, most people are not conscious of the fact that they've done it. Okay, so if you've got a religious system that you made yourself, and you're not even aware that you made it yourself, that's a suspect system. We cannot be trusted to make up our values as we go along. So what does this tell us about our relationship with God? It tells us that God gave us a blessing paired with a mission. We have dominion over the earth, and we do. There's no question about that. I mean, ants might outnumber us mass-wise, but we dominate the earth. We're the only ones on earth that can change the very climate to suit our needs. We dominate the earth. We're supposed to, though,